All right. Hello, Priya.
Hi, how's it going?
Uh, I'm great. I'm great. So I'm very happy to have you here today. We have Priya Iyer Doshi, who is the president of Capacity Interactive. And today we are talking about the third pillar in this course, which is all about campaigns. So I thought I would start by asking you, Priya, to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. As Andrew said, my name is Priya Iyer Doshi. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the president of Capacity Interactive. So I feel like a nice place to start my story is actually to share that I've always been an arts person. I have loved the arts from a very young age. That really manifested in theater for me through high school, and I actually went to school for musical theater. Which is perhaps an interesting turn of events kind of fact about me. And so I went to Ithaca College for musical theater, and I did a couple of years of musical theater. And halfway through college, I essentially realized that the life of a performer probably wasn't one that was going to satisfy me. I'm very type A, and I wanted to feel a little bit more stability. Also, I have so many friends who are artists, and I truly admire them so much. I just knew it wasn't something that was going to bring me the satisfaction that I needed in my career. And so as I said, I've always loved the arts, and I really believe in our industry's ability to change people's perspectives, build empathy, and I think the arts are so important. So I wanted to figure out another way to support the industry. So while I was in college in those second 2 years, I dabbled in a number of different ways to do that: general management, company management, development, and ultimately, I chose marketing. And so my first role was in New York City. I worked for a Broadway producing company in marketing and sales. It was actually Dodgers, which is the producing company that brought Matilda to the Broadway stage. And I was brought on for group sales. Which was a bunch of school groups wanting to come and see Matilda. So I was there for a number of years. It really felt like I was living the dream because Broadway had always been this star in the sky for me and like the ultimate goal. But what I realized over those years is that Broadway is much more about making money than it is about the art. And I really wanted to be somewhere that was about the art and about the power of the arts. And so that's sort of what turned me in the direction of nonprofit. I got to know about Capacity Interactive because we host an annual conference every year. And so while I was at Dodgers, I attended this annual conference. It's called Boot Camp. That was back in 2015 that I attended. And it absolutely moved me to tears because I sat in this audience with a bunch of nonprofit arts marketers, all of whom wanted to help each other and wanted to collaborate, which is not necessarily the vibe on Broadway, which is fine, but it definitely felt different and felt really exciting and just moving to me that people wanted to work together for the greater collective. And I was just so impressed by the capacity employees that I saw on the stage presenting, and I was so stimulated by all of the information. So I weaseled my way in, and I started at Capacity Interactive in February of 2016 as a digital marketing analyst. And over 4 years, sort of grew through Capacity. I managed my own portfolio of clients and led a team of people. I got to present myself on the bootcamp stage, which was a real pinch me moment. And I was living in New York City at the time. In August of 2019, I moved across the country to LA. I was still with Capacity. And at the end of 2019, I had presented at a conference earlier that year. I had met the CEO of a full service creative agency down in San Diego. We had kept in touch as I moved out to the West Coast to LA, and he essentially created a role for me that I couldn't refuse. And so I decided to take a leap of faith and give that a shot. So I left Capacity, which I now call my Capacity Interactive hiatus, and I went to that full service creative agency. They're called Raindrop. They're not arts focused, but I got some exposure to what it means to be in a full service agency, an agency that is building creative for brands. It was all e-commerce and direct to consumer focused, which is very different than the arts. And, you know, I sort of lost my sense of purpose a little bit. I think what I found for myself is that I need to, in some way, shape, or form, believe in what I'm selling. And it was kind of hard to do that when I was selling weighted jump ropes delivered right to your front doorstep. Like I know that it's helping people, but
Yeah.
just wasn't connecting for me. So I was starting to think about what my next step might be. And in January of 2021, Eric Gensler, who's the founder of Capacity Interactive, called me, and he said he was ready for his next step and wondered if I'd come back and lead the firm. So I said yes, took another leap of faith, came back, and was able to lead the firm then for 4 years through now. And I actually have just decided that I am going to be moving on to my next chapter, which has yet to be written. I don't know what it will be, but come the end of June, I actually will be stepping away from that role. And Christopher Williams, who's our number 2, who has been at the company for years and years and years, will be stepping in. So very excited for him. But that's a little bit about me and how I got to where I am today.
Yeah. Wow. So I think that's a great journey. And I think it's a journey that is going to be inspirational to our students, many of whom began or are artists of one form or another, whether musicians or in theater. You were both. Um, and but then also sort of seeing that you can go from studying and loving and being, completely surrounded by arts and culture on stage to a incredibly fulfilling career in life, where in a way you're still on stage, right? Presenting at the boot camp.
Yes.
And Priya, you and I have known each other for quite some time now, and just sort of for the folks listening, I mean, Priya is an amazing person, an amazing leader, and seeing sort of your journey as the head of Capacity Interactive the last few years has just been incredible, and excited to see what comes next.
Me too.
After you maybe get a little sleep.
Yes, looking forward to some rest first and foremost. But
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that I think is really resonant is your focus on purpose. Even when we talk about the work that of this class, which is really about, digital connections in arts and culture, I think we all try to remember that when we start talking about Google or Meta or anything else, these are all tools. But the reason why we are in arts and culture, the reason why we choose to work in this business, is a higher calling, right?
Yeah.
And it comes back to that purpose. So, no shade to the jump ropes, but
Yeah.
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 So you kind of left direct to consumer world, came back to Capacity Interactive, now is at the helm. So talk to us a little bit for the students about what Capacity Interactive is, because this might be the kind of a business that they didn't even know existed before.
Yeah, gladly. So Capacity Interactive is a digital marketing consultancy, and I'll come back to that word consultancy. And we specifically serve arts and culture. That is mostly nonprofit. For many years, it was mostly performing arts, but we have grown very much to serve more visitor serving organizations, museums, and botanical gardens, those types of things as well. And also ventured out of solely nonprofit, though I would say the majority of our client base, which is around 270 arts and culture organizations, the majority of those are in the nonprofit space. We've been around since 2008. Our founder is Eric Gensler, and he ran the company up until about 2021. I would say we serve clients now across a number of different service areas. The main one is digital advertising, and the channels within that sort of vary from client to client, but social advertising, search advertising, you name it. We also support website analytics, which allows us to understand user behavior on the website and make decisions in our marketing based on how people are behaving on the website, the types of things that they have affinities for, things like that. It also helps us actually optimize the website. Perhaps there is a piece of the website that we think is doing an amazing thing. Maybe it's a carousel of quotes. But we actually see through the measurement that nobody actually clicks through the quotes. So why are we taking up space on the page? That type of thing. So really understanding how users are behaving on the website. That's what the analytics piece is about. We support content, so we do actual content creation for clients. We're not a full service agency, so we're not shooting big scale productions, but we are able to support in creating different types of content for campaigns. We also support with a lot of content strategy, so voice and tone workshops, helping organizations really think about content pillars, that type of thing. Email, this is more on the strategic and the measurement side. So email is the most powerful direct response channel. We have people who have given us permission to contact them. And so the way that we communicate with them is super important. It's a great way to get people to buy tickets to our organizations. So we help organizations think about what their overarching strategy and email flow can look like, what the segments that they want to target might be within their email communications, and then how those email communications are actually performing, which is, of course, the measurement side of things. SEO is another service area of ours, which stands for search engine optimization. And that is really helping organizations be as discoverable as possible. So when you're Googling people on the search engine results page, you see the ads at the top, and then you see a bunch of organic results. And search engine optimization is essentially trying to get your organization to show up as far near the top as you possibly can. So that's the SEO piece. And as we speak, we are building an AI consulting practice as well. So we'll be launching that later this year, and just very excited to help arts organizations really leverage AI to the full capacity of that. So those are our 6 service areas. I mentioned the consultancy piece, so I want to talk about why we use that word instead of the word agency. So agency is oftentimes the most important part of the agency is to execute on campaigns. You get a budget, you get dates, you get target audiences, and you get content, and ultimately running that machine is the main objective. Whereas for us as a consultancy, we really see ourselves as an extension of the marketing team, as a true strategic partner to the marketing team. So our goals and the marketing team's goals are the same, and we're working together to figure out the best way to get there, in addition to actually running those campaigns once we get to that point. So that's the way that we sort of see ourselves as different. We serve clients in different ways because we're not an agency and we're more of a consultancy. So that's the difference there. Our team is about 65 people. We are fully remote, so we're spread out all across the U.S. And it's, you know, it's a really great team. And yeah, that's Capacity Interactive.
Yeah. That is fantastic. Even more than I realized that you did, actually. Yeah. So a few things, just sort of connecting a few dots for the students. First of all, there's something that's really important to understand as you're going into the business of arts and culture, whether you're working in marketing or in fundraising or really any of the areas, PR, digital, any of the areas where you're going to be connecting people to your organization, which is, I can think of no organization that does this on their own. So if you're going to be in this business, you need to be working with partners, with vendors, with suppliers who can actually help you realize what you're talking about and what you want to be able to do. And so, you know, the last pillar we were talking about, digital customer and CRM. Obviously, I'm the CEO of a company that has a CRM product. And so part of that is learning not just how to use the technology, but how to work with that vendor. We've talked about websites and web design, and that is, how are you working with the firm that's building your website? Because it's probably not you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard, right? Because different organizations have different budget sizes and different resources that allow them to work with more or less vendors as a result. So certainly budget is an element in considering what your external partners or technology might look like. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, using digital advertising as an example, at Capacity, we have people whose literal everyday full-time job is dedicated to not only executing on the digital advertising campaigns, but also who have a responsibility to keep the pace of the digital landscape, which in and of itself is an extremely difficult thing to do, especially at its current pace, which has just gotten faster and faster and faster over the past decade and even longer. And so to expect somebody sitting inside of an arts organization in a marketing seat who has multiple other competing priorities to then take the same responsibility of keeping the digital pace and take the same ownership of knowing all of the technical shifts happening within the platforms to be able to build and execute those campaigns, measure those campaigns, use the learning and make changes within your strategy so that you can do better next time is just asking a whole lot of a person who has a lot of other things on their plate. And when you have all these other things on your plate, I think keeping ahead of the curve is almost impossible. And so I think when the resources allow, being able to partner with somebody or with a firm who has really dedicated themselves to owning that responsibility on behalf of their clients, on behalf of their industry, is just a really powerful thing. And it brings more people onto the team. I think that's the other thing is oftentimes these marketing teams that we work with are small and scrappy because they have to be. They have to wear all the hats and they have to do all of the things that they have to do. And having other people to collaborate with who don't sit inside of the organization, who, in our case, for example, we've dedicated ourselves to this industry. So we have a sense of benchmarks across the entire industry. Same thing for you, and being able to have access to that and be able to collaborate with people who do have that and have dedicated themselves to that, I think just brings even more value into the organization. So certainly there are massive organizations who have the budget to have subject matter experts in-house across their marketing team. And even then we work with those organizations because still, when the scale is that large, it's still very hard for one person to wrap their arms around something like that. So I don't know if that gets at what you're hoping for, but
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it sort of dovetails nicely into your explanation for why you don't say agency. So for the students, imagine if you are working at a performing arts organization and you've got your season about to launch, right? You've got 50 performances, symphony performances, and you just go to an external party and say, do all of the marketing for that, right? Like, figure out what it's going to look like. What is the message? Send out all the email, like all of that, and just let us know how it goes. I don't know a single arts organization that does that.
Yeah.
Right? What is the norm is you have a marketing department, and it's up to them to work with leadership and programming and everything else to sort of figure out what are the contours of this thing. But then if you have an organization like Capacity Interactive, you're able to basically augment that to get the best practices, to get the latest thing, to get what the kids are talking about these days. So I'm going to get into a little bit maybe now. Actually, no, I'm not going to go one level down yet because there's a very important question. This is at the end of the day, this is a course about digital strategy, and digital strategy in terms of how you connect your people, how you connect your public to your organization. And the final project for this is the students are developing a digital strategy for a fictional organization. So I just want high level from your perspective, where you said, how do you even begin to sort of get into the conversation of digital strategy for arts and culture?
Yeah. So my perspective on this question is very shaped by the idea of media consumption and the way that media consumption behavior has shifted over the years, and specifically thinking about CI's existence. So we were founded right around the time that the first iPhone came out. So this is a very different moment in time when you think about media behavior and media consumption. And at that time, digital was sort of the new frontier, and arts marketers needed help understanding it. And there weren't enough resources for them to do that in-house. And that's why we were founded in the first place. They needed to understand what the digital tools even were, how to use them, what happens when you can measure more? How do you actually use that in a meaningful way? So, media consumption was just in a very different place then than back in 2008. And digital strategy was such a small part of the marketing mix then, right? There was, some people considered it optional. There was definitely an aversion to change, a concern about change, which happens all the time. Change is hard. We know that that's true. And so there were, some questions about what digital could do. I think it was a little scary at that time, and still a little scary to think about the idea that you can target ads to somebody based on their online behavior. Like, that concept was really scary and hard to embrace in that time. So that, that's kind of where we were, and where we are now is digital strategy is a crucial piece of the marketing mix, because media consumption has changed significantly. And there's a ton of data to support this. How much time people spend on their phones and on their laptops each day, how much time people spend on double devices every day. They're watching TV and scrolling TikTok at the same time, or they're on their work laptop and they're getting messages on their phone at the same time. How stimulated people are by TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and where people are going to find information today versus where they were in 2008, and just how the internet was perceived back then versus now. Like, all of these things have changed so much. And so as a result, to me, there was once a time where we talked about digital marketing and traditional marketing, and these are separate things. And to me now, they should no longer be separate, because at the end of the day, it's just marketing, and marketing should be based on where people are consuming media, so that you're reaching people the places where they're already consuming and how they're already consuming. So digital strategy is no longer this new frontier. It's no longer a piece of the marketing mix. It's intertwined in the way that we consume media. And so it should be intertwined in the way that we think about marketing. And the places where we should go should be where people are, not where we want them to be, not where we guess, like, it has to be where they are. And that is the core of digital strategy and why it's important today.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the historical context is really helpful as well. To see how quickly this has all changed.
Yes.
And so digital strategy is really just strategy.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, marketing strategy. I would say also sort of membership fundraising strategy,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And then maybe a little bit about then how is that influenced by company strategy, organizational strategy?
Yeah. Actually, can you repeat that, or maybe phrase it differently? I don't know if I'm following.
Yeah. I think about sort of 50,000-foot view. You've got an organizational mission, maybe you've got a vision.
Yeah.
And then an organization will have sort of an organizational strategy.
Yeah.
And then how do you see this fitting into the larger organizational strategy?
Yeah. So again, I think, mission, vision, these are things that are sort of the core principles of why something exists. And then organizational strategy starts to get more into, here's the why, and the why now needs to be making an impact somehow, right?
Mhm.
It needs to be disseminated into the world. And digital, which once was a tool, now is so much more than a tool, is so intertwined in that too, right? The way that we are actually allowing our why to be amplified as an organization so much relies today on digital strategy, if the organization is eager to be modern, stay with the times, reach certain types of audiences, and really focus on the future and sustainability, which I have some other thoughts on, and I'm happy to share those at some point later in our conversation. But that's kind of how I see it. I see those things as very intertwined, because once you get to the organizational strategy, it's really about the impact and how you're making it. And I think digital strategy has to be intertwined in that for a modern organization to be able to make an impact.
Yeah, no, that's great. Intertwined.
Yes.
So, and actually, start with why is actually one of the little videos that we're going to watch as part of this class. So I love that you kept talking about your why. It's like
Yes.
we planned it. Um, so now I want to get a little sort of peel back the onion another layer. So we've talked about sort of you and your background and what Capacity Interactive is, and sort of the idea of how to work with a partner, how to work with a vendor. And then kind of high level about how you sort of enter the stream of digital strategy and how we think about it, and how it really is sort of quite pervasive these days and threaded through an organizational strategy. Now, I shared this with you. The way that we've set up this particular class is to think about digital connections across 4 pillars. So the digital content, digital customer, digital campaigns, and digital commerce. And so at this point in the class, we've done a bit of a deep dive on digital content, kind of what it is, where it lives, spent more time on websites and web development as kind of the hub, the sort of obvious place you go when you think about digital content. We've spent some time on the customer, talking about kind of the difference between first-party data and second and third-party data, deep dive into CRM, customer relationship management. And so this week is really all about sort of the campaign side of it. Like, so taking the content and the customers and bringing them together to create the actual interactions that will hopefully fulfill the strategy and the mission. So this is this is like a linchpin moment for us in this class. And so that's why I was glad that I had you, because this is your world. And as we were talking, we thought it might be a nice way to think about how to even talk about this piece of it by pretending that I am a potential new client for Capacity Interactive. I'm the head of marketing or digital or development at an arts organization. And we have approached you as the president of CI to see if we might work together to help you understand kind of our needs and how you might be able to help us. So can we start there? Nice to meet you again.
Yes, nice to meet you too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so where I would want to start this conversation is really to ask a number of questions, because I think some of my point of view on just like what it means to be a good partner is going to come through in this. So forewarning there, but in order for a client relationship to be successful, it needs to be a good fit on both sides. We want to we as a firm want to understand what your problems are, what's keeping you up at night, what is it that you're challenged by in any given moment, and we want to be a part of the solution. That's our ultimate goal. And so a lot of what we do before we even understand what the nature of how we might be working together will look is understand what it is that's keeping you up at night. And so those are the types of questions that I might ask you. There's certainly some discovery that can be done on your website. There's certainly some discovery that can be done around, the budget size of the organization and things like that. And because we've been doing this for several years now, we do kind of understand how different attributes of an organization might influence the strategy, might influence their greatest needs, their greatest challenges. But of course, at the same time, no two clients are the same, right? And it's very important to take an idiosyncratic approach to this on purpose. Again, we don't want to operate as an agency might, where there are sort of universal solutions that we'd apply based on the type of client that you are. It's a very one-to-one relationship in the consulting space. But anyway, before we even start working together, I would want to ask questions like, what does your marketing team look like? What size is your marketing team? What types of roles do you actually have on that marketing team? Because different organizations, the answers to that are different. Sometimes they have an entire content creation team in-house. Sometimes none of their content is created in-house and it's completely outsourced. Sometimes there's a CRM specialist. Sometimes that's in IT, or sometimes that's in box office and it's a completely separate place. So wanting to understand what the makeup of the team is, wanting to understand the background in digital. Sometimes organizations come to us and this is their first time trying digital at all. And they want us to be their partner in that. That's a very different organization partner than one who has been investing in digital from the beginning of the time with these tools, and they're coming to us because they want to level it up, because they think that we can help them unlock some potential that they haven't already reached. And the way that we'd approach both of those partnerships would be completely different. So we'll want to understand that. We'll want to understand how much they can invest, in the digital piece itself. Some organizations, the answer is 100,000 plus. Some organizations, it's I have $10,000 for this campaign. Like, do you think that's enough? What do you think we can do? So the nature of those conversations can be very different. And obviously, level of investment also influences what channels we might want to use and those types of things. So trying to get a sense of that. Wanting to understand more about the nature of the season. So if it's a theater or an opera or a symphony, where in the season are they? How has the season been going? How is the season programmed? Do they feel good about the way that the season was programmed, or are they just waiting for the next season to get there so that they can get past this one? And how is the audience responding? Subscriber audience responding? How are the new to file audience responding? Those types of things. Of course, their goals, revenue goals, their capacity goals, all of these things that they're working towards. Because as I said, as a consultancy, we very much want to share in those goals, right? We don't want to have separate things that we're trying to do, and then ultimately the marketing team is trying to do something and we're not connected to that, because it just won't work well. So we want to get invested in those things. Understanding the makeup of the audience. So what is your subscriber base versus how many people come in through single tickets, or your membership base, those types of things. And then, technology that they rely on, CRM, what they use for ticketing, what they use for email, those types of things, so that we can get a better sense of technology wise, like what does that universe look like? All of those types of questions often uncover other random things, because a lot of what's happening on these calls is not just listening to what the prospective client says in response, but it's listening to all of the extraneous things that they happen to mention as they're actually telling me about their ticketing platform. How do they feel about their ticketing platform? Do they wish they were on that one, or do they wish they were on a different one? How do they feel about their website? How do they feel about their internal stakeholders that they have to report up to? All of that is sort of giving me context clues. We call that third level listening. Better understanding what people aren't saying, and what people are saying and how they're saying it, and how that helps you understand what they ultimately need, which might not be what they say they need. It might be something different. So all of that is, a part of consulting. So what I think is interesting about this is that the client has not signed on yet. Like, this is all a prospective client, and we're really invested in understanding so that how we scope the partnership best serves the problems that we are trying to help the client solve, as opposed to what we think works best in general for organizations of this archetype. We really don't want to go about it that way, because every organization's different. The other thing that's great about this is, by the time we start the work, the actual consulting team, which is not the same as the team that is having these new business conversations. We have people in business development who are having these conversations. And then once the client has aligned on scope, they've signed on and they've agreed to work with us, they are working directly with the consulting team. And by the time that consulting team is meeting the client, they have so much information in background that they can dig even deeper with the questions when they first get to interact with the client. So it's not about, okay, what are your revenue goals and capacity goals? It's about, tell me about the things you want to accomplish that don't show up on your revenue and capacity goals. Tell me about how all of that can be achieved and how we can achieve that part together. What types of new audiences do you want to bring in? That part is harder to talk about if you haven't already talked about, okay, well, yes, this is the revenue I'm accountable for. This is a capacity those things have to kind of get out of the way before you can dig deeper.
Yes. I think the really interesting part about this whole process is that very little of what you have asked about is actually have anything to do with digital technology.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's a good reinforcement for the students that digital strategy is about business strategy, is about company. So you're asking about what is your performance cycle? How are your shows going? What are your financial goals? And then digital will come in and help you get to those goals, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're in a digital first world, right? So how do you solve problems in a digital first world is how digital comes in,
Yeah. So can I give you, so thinking of some of the questions you just asked, can I give you some hypothetical answers, and then you can start talking about how you might help us and how.
Totally.
All right. So I like the idea, just because I think it's a relatively simple thing to think through. It's kind of cut and dried. Let's just say we are, mid-sized have a couple people in our marketing department. It's not a huge department. It's not a department of one. We're a performing arts organization with a regular season. And we are, just because of sort of historical background, we had a general manager who was there for many years. Our audience was a little bit older. So we have, we post here and there on social, but this is really our moment to really join the digital world.
Yeah.
I can't say that we really have done that before, but we
Yeah.
now have an imperative. We have some new leadership. We have new board. They're telling us we need to sort of get present and current. And we are struggling a little bit with audiences. Our older audiences haven't really come back since the pandemic. We feel like the product that we have could be attractive to younger audiences, but we're not entirely sure how to find them.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I would say that when starting from scratch, kind of starting in this place where you're really trying to build a digital audience from scratch, right? Because the digital presence for this organization has not been significant in the past. And sometimes what happens in that is that you are first trying to collect all the people who do already follow you, but didn't know you had a digital presence. So you're trying to get those people to engage with you now digitally, because now there is a way for them to do that. And then you're thinking about this idea of acquisition, of bringing in new audiences. And the platforms that tend to be really good to make that piece happen are the platforms that are really good in the storytelling space. So when you think about advertising that truly tells a story, that brings you in because of the way that the story is told, it's social platforms. It's Meta was once Facebook, though certainly like that tends to skew older, but not only older, but does tend to skew older. And of course, Instagram. So that would be kind of the first place that I would start and sort of say, okay, let's try to build the digital presence there. Let's first try to build some remarketing pools, which is where we place some code on your website so that each time people land on certain pages of your website and they're mapped back to their social profile, we can grab them and put them in a pool of people that then will continue to see your advertising over time. So let's make sure that people who are already visiting your website, who also are engaging on social media, are aware that now that they can also engage with you digitally through social media, whether it be Facebook or Instagram. So let's make sure those people are all there. Let's also see, are there people in your email database who could be engaging with you digitally, but again, didn't have a way to do that before? Let's get a list of those people and see if we can map that to social profiles. And we can actually upload that list and grab those people as well, so that we can make sure that they're in the know about any communications around your season, specific shows we want to sell to them, those types of things.
So let me just drill in on a couple of those things. So what you're talking about is broadening. We had a pretty narrow set of channels. We had a website, of course, everyone has a website. We do email because everyone does email. So what you're saying, you have a website, people are going to your website. And so there is a technology that exists where you know who's on your website.
Yeah.
And you can actually then target them on social.
Yes. Well, you'd have to build the code to actually make that happen. But yes, that can happen pretty quickly. We can place that code pretty quickly so that, people, hundreds, depending on your website, depending on the size of your organization, tens, hundreds, thousands of people visit your website every day. And those people also have social media. So there is a way for you to use that code so that those people are following into a pool of people that then can be retargeted through your social campaigns.
And so that's the concept of retargeting.
Exactly.
That we're talking about.
Yeah.
So this is when people are like, I was just looking at jump ropes, and now wherever I go, I see jump ropes.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's retargeting.
Exactly.
And then on the email, again, email has been around a long time. Everybody uses email. It was interesting earlier on when you said that email is still sort of the most effective way.
Totally.
I think of email as kind of old-fashioned, but it has staying power.
Well, think about, email is so personal, which is part of the reason why it's so powerful, but also can have its downsides.
Mhm.
But when an organization asks me for my email address, or when I willingly give an organization my email address, I'm raising my hand. I'm telling them that I'm interested and that I want more information. Sometimes you
Mhm.
just do it for the discount, you get the discount and then you unsubscribe. Fine. Fine.
Yeah.
But sometimes you do it because I want to know what's happening. I want to be the first person in the know. And in the case of an arts organization, because I want to be in the know when tickets go on sale, when I want to be in the know when subscriptions go on sale.
Mhm.
I want to be in the know when there's a under 40 event that I can go to, like whatever it
Mhm.
might be. So I'm volunteering. So it's not, it shouldn't feel as disruptive.
Mhm.
That's why when people buy email addresses from, as opposed to the person giving you the email address, an organization goes and they buy these trade lists of email
Mhm.
addresses and then they start emailing those people right away. It feels like an invasion of privacy. So that's
Yeah.
why I say it's two sides to the same coin, but it's such a personal thing to allow an organization to show up in your inbox. And when done appropriately without all of the noise, it's such a special way and such a captive audience that you then can communicate with. So that's where the power lies. And I
Mhm.
think people have abused that power, which is why it's gotten to be such a mess and different people manage their inboxes differently. But if truly at its purest state, you've given an organization your email address because you want more information, it's such a beautiful way to raise your hand and a beautiful way for the organization to then get to communicate with their biggest fans.
And the data that you've got and is out in the world suggests that it is really a powerful way, right? And
Absolutely.
so we, in our last sort of module, we talked about first-party data versus third-party data. And I think what you're
Yeah.
talking about is a really good example of that, right? Like if somebody
Yeah.
has said, they've raised their hand, they've opted in, they're getting that email, that's
Yeah.
first-party data.
Yep.
Whereas if you've bought a list off of, some broker somewhere and you're spamming that list,
Yeah.
that's third-party data. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so getting back to kind of this organization that's decided to join the digital age, you're just saying take what they're already doing. They're doing email,
Yep.
and then there is this thing that you can do with the social platforms and actually take that email information, upload it,
Yeah.
um, and then target them that way as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too, in terms of first party data, I think the ultimate goal is to grow your first party data in general. Because brand new people, we haven't even gotten to talking about what those audience segments look like, but if you have a goal to bring new audiences into the space, let me tell you what's not going to happen naturally. A brand new person who's never heard of your organization sees an ad and immediately transacts. That is not what happens. That is not how people move through the customer journey or through the customer
Mhm.
funnel. What happens is people see something that gets them interested. So maybe they click and they look at your Facebook page or they look at your Instagram profile. Maybe they follow you. So now they've moved further into interest, but they haven't bought a ticket. Maybe a couple of weeks later, they see something else and they are even more intrigued. So they go to your website. So now they're part of your retargeting pool. Maybe they sign up for your emails. Now they're a part of your first party data. And then maybe 2 months down the line, they've been getting some really good emails from you. They see a program they really want to participate in, then they transact. And that is not a brand new person who immediately walked through your doors. It's just completely unrealistic expectation. But if your goal is to get more people to raise their hand in interest of your organization, then yes, of course, those people ultimately will buy tickets. But I think digitally thinking about it as increasing that first party data pool, especially in a world today where privacy is such a concern, and we want to make sure that people don't feel like they're over targeted and over followed on the internet. And there's actual regulations that are stopping that from being possible now, which wasn't always the case. And that is a good thing. User privacy is ultimately a good thing for our society. And what it means is that as marketers, we have to think differently about the way that we focus on audiences who have raised their hand and how we are going to make sure everyone who wants to raise their hand actually gets a chance to do that.
Yeah, it's such a hugely important point. Sort of the respect right? It's with great power comes great responsibility. And I think
Exactly.
when you now have that first party data, meaning they have said, we want to have some connection with you, even if it's a
Hmm.
tenuous one, that you don't then abuse it.
Yeah.
And I loved you taking through the customer journey because that's something that that this class really needs to hear multiple times, the importance
Yeah.
of that journey. And you gave such a really good example of, sort of that try before you buy um,
Yeah.
way of thinking about that. As we're sort of going along through this conversation now, I want to kind of pivot a little bit
Yeah.
to talk about the sort of the specific. When we were talking before, I think before the recording, you said, there's this whole toolkit of digital tools,
Hmm.
and different organizations at different times in their life will use different tools. Could you just talk a little bit, kind of at a high level, sort of the main kinds of tools that folks who are working in this world should be considering
Yeah.
in getting
Yeah.
this work done? Yeah.
Yeah, so as I said, on the social side, which is really thinking about channels that are more education, entertainment based, that's the type of mind space that people are in when they're there. Of course, you have the Meta conglomerate, which is Facebook and Instagram. Of course, TikTok, YouTube in all its forms, both long form video and short form video. And then, of course, there are many others beyond that, but I listed them in that order because when we're specifically thinking about arts and culture, um, these organizations tend to have limited resources. And generally speaking, again, we do not take a universal approach, but generally speaking, I would say organizations should consider social platforms in that order. The meta side of things, which you can run Facebook and Instagram campaigns all within one, and then TikTok and YouTube, depending on what type of content, your ability to feed the content machine inside of your organization. Do you have a team that can do that? Are you outsourcing it? What's actually possible? Because you have to be able to feed the content that the platform needs. So
So
that's
just actually, could you just talk a little more about feeding the content machine? Because I think that's actually a really important point. What does
yeah.
that mean? What does that mean?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think all these platforms and all different types of audiences need different types of content. So for example, if someone's never heard of your organization, perhaps what they need to learn about first is what the heck your organization is, not what that specific show that's happening this weekend is. They need to know what your purpose is. They need to know all the different types of ways that you serve your audiences through subscriptions, through specific shows, through your community engagement events, those types of things. And that's different content. There's long form branded content, there's show specific short form content, and then of course there is where you're viewing the content. Now, of course, not today, in most cases, it's happening on your phone. So making sure that the vertical video content bank that you have is really, really strong so that you can continue to put that type of content into your social platforms as you're seeing more and more people see certain types of content. You want to make sure you keep it fresh, right? You want to make sure that people aren't continuing to see the same thing over and over again. And then you also want to make sure that some of that content is experience based, some of that content is interview based, some of that
Hmm.
content is very specific to the program that you're promoting. There's all of these different ways that we are having the opportunity to talk to our audiences, and all of these different ways we want to represent our brand and our organization on social media platforms. And so simply choosing and having budget is not enough.
Mhm.
Having a structure internally or externally that allows you to give the platforms the content that they need in the regular fashion that they need is equally important, because you can't wake up one day and say, I'm going to run on TikTok now, but you don't have the internal structures to actually make that happen successfully. Because you don't have a person to create that content. You don't know what type of content you want to create. You have to have conversations about whether the voice is right or wrong for the organization. All of these things have to happen in advance. And all of that is part of feeding the content machine.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I mean, it's like if you decide to be on TikTok, you're sort of saying, or YouTube, sort of saying, we're now going to have a TV station.
Yeah.
And the TV station, it can't just play the same show every hour, and it can't just
Right.
go dark for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I guess you could use that analogy for all of the platforms. Like it can't just be once every 6 months you post something.
Right.
So that's kind of like so that's the social kind of.
Yep.
So then what are the other areas that you might work with an organization on?
Yeah. So we talked about email, and
Mhm.
that's definitely a big one. And oftentimes, what will happen is the organization has the capability in-house to execute, to actually send the emails, but thinking about the types of emails that they want to send, who they want to send them to, what the flow should be when somebody joins their email list, those are the types of things we might help with. But again, email is an
Mhm.
incredibly powerful channel that I think the majority of arts organizations are underutilizing.
Hmm.
So just such an important channel. Search is another channel to consider. And this channel is different from social in that it is intent based. So when someone's searching for something, they have a clear intention of what they're looking for. It could be super specific, they could be just searching for the name of your organization, or it could be more broad things to do in Minneapolis. Maybe Minneapolis Orchestra will show up, whatever it might be. But those types of searches are with specific intent, as opposed to when you're on social media and you're scrolling and you're just trying to be entertained or educated. So
Mhm.
search is a really powerful tool, and there are multiple components to that. One is the Google Grant Program, which perhaps you have already talked about or not talked about, but it is 10,000 free dollars that Google gives to nonprofits for search advertising. It sounds really great. There's a ton of restriction on it, so it's not really as great as you think, but it's free. It's free money in some way, so certainly taking advantage of it is important, but that being the only thing is not enough. So you supplement that with paid search. And the paid search comes from branded terms. So when people are searching for your organization, you want to make sure your ad's at the top of the page and that StubHub isn't beating you out, or SeatGeek isn't beating you out. And then you want to also try to win for some of these more middle or top of funnel terms. So the things to do type of search is
Mhm.
very expensive to bid on. But if you can win for those, if people search things to do and your organization shows up at the top, that's incredibly powerful. It's harder to do that, but sometimes organizations can win. Or maybe they're searching arts in Minneapolis. That's it's a more specific thing. So we call that more middle funnel. So maybe that's something that you can bid on as well and win. But either way, when people have a certain intention, you want to show up if you're relevant. And that's what paid search allows you to do.
Mhm.
And then the SEO piece, of course, is everything below the ads, making sure that the appropriate keywords are on your website, the appropriate backend title tags, meta descriptions. These are all very technical terms, but basically your website can be built in a way that makes you as discoverable as possible. And we help organizations do that as well.
Mhm. Great. So we will have talked a little bit about sort of how Google tags work and how the auction
Yeah.
works as well.
Okay.
And we will have talked a little bit about search engine optimization and how you can improve your web pages to show up more in organic search.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's interesting, the intent piece of it versus social, which is, I don't know what the word is for that. It's sort of you stumble upon it. There's
Yeah.
probably a
Yeah.
better word.
Well, you're in a time where you're trying to be entertained. So I think the advertising that works best is advertising that fits into that mindset, as
Mhm.
opposed to super salesy advertising feels like an interruption to whatever escapism entertainment you're trying to achieve by being on social media, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way I think about it.
Um, and then email is very targeted. It's
Yes.
yeah.
Very targeted, yes. But even within
Yeah.
email, there's an opportunity to get hyper specific. So when you think about a patron's relationship to an organization, someone who's been subscribed for 10 years is different than a first time subscriber, is different than a multi ticket buyer. So perhaps they bought tickets to 3 shows in your last season. That's what we call maybe a multi ticket buyer versus a single ticket buyer, somebody who bought a ticket only 1 show in the past season. All 4 of
Mhm.
those segments are all within your first party data. They're all people who have clearly come to your organization and have spent money with your organization, but there's still an opportunity to talk to all of them differently.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to kind of thread this all together a little bit with other parts of the class that you won't have seen. But we start the class by talking about personas and the people who will or may or could interact with your organization. And so many of the things you've talked about today, are they new? Have they been with you for a long time? Have they been to one performance? Have they been to 6 performances? The demographics of where different age groups, you know, live on these different sorts of channels. So I think we talked about digital content. So thinking about the different kinds of images, the different kinds of stories, which platforms are better for storytelling. You made the great point that if somebody is scrolling something because of entertainment, think about how you fit into that versus being like you're watching your favorite TV show and suddenly an ad pops up.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of the directed nature of email, where that's taking the information that's in your CRM potentially, and being able to target, being able to personalize it. And all of this are interactions that are leading toward greater engagement. And so when you talked about the funnel, or when you talked about the customer journey, how it could be, I loved how you sort of said that. It can begin with you just sort of scrolling through something and you just clicked, or you even just looked at, right? Because you can also like dwell time or whatever they call that, right? How long did you
Yeah.
spend staring at an ad?
Yep.
Um, and then how these technologies can then follow you around for the retargeting. Um, and so I just feel like this pillar, the campaign pillar, is taking the content and the customer um, and and the personas and the interactions and kind of creating this whole universe
Yeah.
that should be, if you've sort of developed your strategy right, all should be moving in the direction of the digital strategy and the company strategy to fulfill their mission. So
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's also feels sort of bottomless, right? Like there's just
It
like, just sort of exponential.
Yeah.
How do you And so when sort of getting back to the realities of so many arts organizations have a limited budget and and the people working there have limited time. Like, how do you take this sort of endless wealth of possibilities and help drive people towards sort of the best result?
Yeah. I mean, it all goes back to what I talked about at the beginning of our client journey, which is what is the problem you're trying to solve? Every arts organization has their revenue goals, their capacity, right? But what ultimately are you trying to achieve beyond that? And every organization is different. And so every situation has to be treated differently. And, I think the amount that someone is able to invest influences how many of these channels they can take advantage of. Because
Mhm.
my point of view and CI's point of view is it's better to take that budget and really make an impact in a single place versus
Mm.
trying to spread it into as many channels as possible just to have a tiny bit of visibility, but not really making an impact in any of them, but at least having a presence. Because at the end of the day, we want to make an impact, right? This is digital, it's measurable. We can see what revenue has been attributed to our efforts through digital advertising. And you want to influence the bottom line. You want to help the organization meet its goals. So budget, ability to feed the content machine, especially the way that we think about that now versus even last year or the year before, it just has shifted so rapidly. And that's
Mhm.
one of the hardest things today. An organization might be ready in all the ways to get on TikTok, but they don't have a way to feed the content machine. And that just means that that's the last piece they have to figure out before they can do it.
Yeah.
That piece is important. What are your audience goals? Are you focused on re-engaging subscribers who have lapsed in the past season, or are you focused on investing in a younger audience for the future? Both, neither answer is right or wrong. Different
Mhm.
organizations have different answers to that question, but that might influence where you want to be and why and how and what you want your
Yeah.
message to be. What your marketing team looks like, what your region is, what your season, like all of these things influence what you choose. So it can't be a universal answer.
Mhm.
And my advice is to always map back to your why. Why,
Yeah.
what is it trying to fix? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And these are ways that you solve the problem, but the problem is the thing that you can't lose sight of.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Um, two wrap-up questions.
Okay.
Um, this one is slightly borrowed from Eric Gensler, actually. He used to ask at the end of all the See Eye to Eyes. But
Oh, we still do.
yeah, oh, and you still do, and you still do. What is what is one piece of advice, right? You've got here your audience is future arts professionals, arts leaders.
Yeah.
What's one piece of advice for them?
Yeah. So it's a really hard time for this industry, and I just like I want to say that before I share any advice because I think it sets the scene. I think the way that this industry has and hasn't fully recovered from COVID is part of it. I think the shifts in the administration in terms of funding cuts, in terms of what economic uncertainty does to the way people think about discretionary spending, which at the end of the day, arts and culture is viewed as discretionary spending, right? So all of these things impact how the industry is feeling today, and it's hard. But um, arts and culture, storytelling, these are crucial elements to building more empathy, more compassion, to shifting people's perspectives. These are all things that are very needed right now. So I think that is then the North Star. That's the purpose. That's the drive. And the arts are not exempt from what it means to run a successful business in today's economy. They are also businesses. They need to be run as businesses. And I think oftentimes we hope that the power of the arts are enough, and they're not. I wish that they were, but they're not, because a business with longevity is also important. And so thinking about the longevity of audiences, thinking about investing in the future, not just solving today's problems, but making sure that the organization has a runway, that's important. Making sure that the organization is financially sound, not just making decisions in the moment because the art says you have to make that decision now. If the funding is stopping, where are we finding it to backfill? Being able to think proactively about that is so important. And another thing that's really crucial to run a successful business that I know you will agree with, Andrew, is caring for people without making rash decisions based on a single moment in time. Sometimes that's something as extreme as layoffs. Sometimes that's something less extreme that's more about restructuring and whatever. But the longevity and sustainability of arts organizations is just as important as the power of the arts on people today. And both of those things have to be true in order for this industry to continue to thrive. So don't prioritize one or the other, prioritize both. That's my advice.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful advice. And I think what you said, I wish that the power of the arts was enough, but it's not.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
I wish it was too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important, but it's not the only thing that's important.
Right. It's driving it, but you need to have the business underneath it to support it.
Yeah.
And final question, which is so appropriate since we've just been talking about social media for this whole time. What are two follows that you would recommend for these students to go to their phones and hit follow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I have to say Capacity Interactive, so I'm going to give you three because I don't want to only do that. So Capacity Interactive, and we put out a number of resources. So I definitely recommend going and checking out what all of the facets of that are. We have a podcast, we have a conference, we have a blog, we put out case studies, we put out research for the field. Content marketing for us has been very important from the beginning. So there's a plethora. We have Capacity Academy as well, which is sort of a academy series that you can participate in. So certainly that. So follow us. But two other ones. The first is Know Your Own Bone, which is this woman named Colleen Dillon Schneider. She's absolutely incredible. It is part of a larger conglomerate called Impacts Experience. They put out incredible data for arts and culture, talks about intention, talks about the mindset of the consumer and the audience and the impact that that has on the industry today. And especially given all the shifts that I talked about earlier in our economy and recovering from COVID, just data so often data is not the only answer, but it helps contextualize answers, and it helps give more foundation to any point of view or argument. And so know your own bone is one. And then another one is Aubrey Bergauer. She just released a book last year called Run It Like a Business that talks again about this balance of the art and the business and the importance of both. She also has sort of an academy series. She does a number of talks. She has a podcast. Really, really inspiring woman as well. So those are my two recommendations, and then CI.
Wonderful. Well, I can't say enough about the CI content as well. And I know from the beginning, you and your team have a give it all away kind of perspective, right? This is not about holding proprietary data or information back. It's really sharing it to lift up the whole sector. And I think that's been hugely appreciated. And yeah, and certainly I think that there's some stipend available for extracurriculars, whether that's training or that sort of thing. But huge plug for the Capacity Interactive Bootcamp, Digital Marketing Bootcamp, which is in September, October this year.
November this year.
November, yeah. So yeah. I mean, you talked about it at the beginning of your origin story, and it's just
we'd love to have you there, and we also live stream. So if you can't physically make it to
so those are some great follows. I can't thank you enough, Priya. We could have gone on for another 16 hours.
I know.
But this is just such a gift to have your perspective from your experience and from where you sit is just invaluable to us all. So thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.